I come bearing absolutely scintillating news. I have gotten the final pieces of my desk delivered, and this setup is going to actually kind of look the same. All I'm going to do is redesign the desk. The camera angle is going to be different. The microphone angle is going to be different, so you finally won't feel like you're getting the POV of my own microphone arm. But this will begin to redesign this weekend. I'm incredibly excited about it, and I hope you are too, obviously. Now, we will maintain people, People Guardiola back there. Frogiola, People Frogiola. We came up with a name. Somebody came up with a name for the frog, and I forgot it. But I didn't forget about Greenland. Yeah, there was no transition there. There was no segue at all. I didn't forget about Greenland because I have been obsessed with football in Greenland for years, and something just happened that's going to shift everything and give Greenland the opportunity to qualify for a World Cup. They will have that chance now because of what just happened. But I have loved Greenland's football for years. 2 years ago, I tried to go to Greenland to record a YouTube video similar to the Hidden Grounds video that we did in Faroe Islands as the first episode of that series. But I found out that I wasn't going to be able to get to Greenland when I was trying to book it 4 months in advance because that's like a big fishing season or something in Greenland. And so literally every flight into Greenland during the Greenland Cup was finished. And if you're wondering what the Greenland Cup is, that's Greenland's entire football league. They don't actually have a football league. They have more of a tournament. They will pick one city in Greenland. Everybody else takes the planes in, and they play basically a giant cup over a couple of weeks in that one city instead of having some sort of national league because it's obviously too cold most of the time to be able to do that. They are trying to team up with different football organizations to build more indoor facilities, but Greenland is the ultimate footballing backwater, but that is no more. You see, Greenland for a long time was attempting to apply to join UEFA, which is the European Federation. They'd be able to play in the Euros, and then ideally, if they join FIFA as well, they'd be able to try to qualify for World Cups. But there is an issue, and that Greenland is, while an autonomous nation, largely autonomous nation, it is still governed in some part by Denmark. It is a part of Denmark, and UEFA has rules about which teams are able to join UEFA and which teams aren't when they're in that situation. Now, there's a lot of different things I've seen written by reputable journalists that don't seem to know for sure exactly why Greenland doesn't seem to be able to make a lot of progress. Everything from a lack of infrastructure to the fact that UEFA is no longer accepting members that are not recognized by the UN, but like Scotland and Wales and Northern Ireland and the Faroe Islands and Gibraltar, they would all like a word, right? Those are all countries that are not recognized by the UN. In fact, they're not countries at all. They're nations within a greater country, but apparently Greenland's a bridge too far. I'm buying the infrastructure debate more because Greenland's national stadium looks like that's Greenland's national stadium. Now, granted, sick, apparently it seats 2,000 people. I don't know where, maybe on the rocks. Maybe they're just sitting on the rocks. But that's the national stadium. Now, I will say that the turf, according to Wikipedia, is 2-star rated, which is suitable for all UEFA competitions, which means you could technically, based off the quality of the pitch and the rules of UEFA, play the Champions League final here and, just standing room only or something. Security would be a bit of a challenge, but, according to how hard it is for me to get a flight to Greenland, most of the fans wouldn't be able to make it there anyways. But Greenland's had a national soccer team since 1980. They just don't, they play in different matches. They actually have a friendly this weekend against Turkmenistan. I know that because the reason I never leave this chair is I'm actually just plugged into the FIFA mainframe. I'm just constantly downloading new useless information. Except even if that was true, I wouldn't be getting any info on Greenland because they're not a member of FIFA. I just know everything all the time. I'm terminally online and I spend 1 minute offline per day, and that's to take a shower. I boiled it down to 1 minute. And it's quite speedy. But, we gotta break the perception that somebody that sits here and talks to their own computer all day smells bad. I smell fantastic. And anytime you meet me, feel free to tell me that. Or, rate it yourself. My musk has been described as lawyer cowboy. But back to the point, Greenland's had a team since 1980. And they finally come up with a different plan to try to actually be able to qualify for a World Cup. Because Greenland is in a rare position. Greenland is actually a viable candidate for multiple continents. Now, obviously, Denmark owns Greenland, right? But Greenland, where it sits, in case you're not familiar with a map, is about halfway between North America and Europe, which means Greenland actually has the opportunity to apply for a different federation, a much funnier and more messed up federation, but a different federation called CONCACAF, right? If you've not, for whatever reason, heard of CONCACAF, it's North America, Central America, and the Caribbean. And CONCACAF is a footballing backwater. No team from CONCACAF has ever won the World Cup. It's hosted a few World Cups, though, and will host the World Cup in 2026, which will be fun. But it is generally a federation that struggles to be able to play even respectable qualifying matches from time to time and is known for general insanity, right? You've got Europe where everything is kind of put together and nice the vast majority of the time. Then you have federations like CONCACAF and South America sometimes, and definitely, Africa and definitely Asia, where weird things are just happening, like the U.S. playing a friendly away against El Salvador in essentially a mudslide, right? And Greenland has an opportunity to actually join CONCACAF, and it was announced today. I saw this tweet from the Sweeper. They have officially applied for membership. It had been rumored for years. Again, because I'm tapped in on this and I am all for Greenland football. I have corresponded with the head of press for their FA for each of the past 2 years about being able to go and cover the Greenland Cup. Like, I am emotionally invested in Greenland, and we will do this video at some point. I will bring you with me to Greenland, and we will watch the Greenland Cup together and make a video about it. And it's going to be great. If you've not seen the Faroe Islands video that we made, I think I have it pinned to the top of the main channel, but it's 7 days on a tiny island with Europe's smallest team. Fantastically fun. But they announced that they'd actually applied. Like, there's a big difference between one exploratory article on ESPN about like, hey, this might happen someday, and hey, the application's gone through. Because CONCACAF actually has no problem with nations that aren't sovereign. There are actually a lot of those nations in CONCACAF. Just think about how many of those nations are in the Caribbean that participate in qualifying and those sorts of, like, Curacao is a not half bad nation that is basically, I want to say the political situation is exactly the same, right? But it is governed by the Netherlands in some capacity. So is Bonaire, or France with Guadeloupe, or England with Montserrat. Like, these are not countries that play at the that play around in the United Nations in New York. They are countries that play in CONCACAF, though, and they not only have the opportunity to play in CONCACAF, but the majority of those countries, not all of them, the majority of those countries have the opportunity to qualify for the World Cup itself. Curacao can go to the World Cup. And so Greenland's put in its official application to be a member of CONCACAF. Now, this would allow Greenland to participate in CONCACAF's championship. It happens every 2 years. It's called the Gold Cup. It also has a Nations League, which happens every 2 years, that Greenland would also be able to participate in. But I imagine there will be some hurdles, right? The travel is not an easy thing to figure out. Right, if you're trying to fly a team from the British Virgin Islands to go play a road game at Greenland, right, like, that is a more significant road trip than the British Virgin Islands playing against Bermuda or Belize, right? Like, it's a little bit of a bigger trip. And anytime, since I've done videos about this in Oceania, I have a weird familiarity with this. Anytime you're trying to gain acceptance into one of these federations, part of your application are accommodations, which Greenland's going to struggle with. This is a nation of 57,000 people, right? Granted, that is not near the smallest nation in CONCACAF. That would be Montserrat, which is about 5,000, and they are able to meet these qualifications, but the terrain is not necessarily as difficult. Actually, in Montserrat, there's like a volcano, and the reason the population's so low is a lot of people left because the volcano blew up. But outside of the volcano, a little more sunny, little easier to build than in Greenland, right? And you also need a stadium, right? You need training facilities for the other team that you're going to host. You need a stadium that meets all the qualifications, and while the field, the artificial turf that Greenland's installed at Nuuk National Stadium is good, they're going to need, stands, and there's all sorts of different rules, totally dependent on what federation you're joining. But CONCACAF is clearly easier to get into. It has to be, because CONCACAF is made up of a lot of very small Caribbean nations that are able to meet that requirement. They are actually able to meet that requirement. And that means that Greenland does actually have a pretty good chance here. They've also been working on a deal, according to an article SI and the BBC have already started to cover this story, which I think is amazing. I didn't know Greenland was going to make that much news, but they're already starting to talk about potentially hosting matches in Iceland while they're working on investing in it. Because even though Greenland's had a federation since 1980, there's a whole different ball game when you have to organize a federation that is actually participating in all this sort of stuff. And then once they do that, you also have to be able to meet FIFA's requirements to try and qualify for a World Cup, right? Because there are certain nations that don't attempt to qualify for a World Cup, but they can still go to the Gold Cup. Nations like Guadeloupe and Martinique is another example. Now, those nations can't go to the World Cup. I believe my understanding of the situation is because France, which owns those islands, like literally blocks them and like doesn't allow them to apply for FIFA membership, just lets them play in CONCACAF. Nations like Curacao can. And I've not seen anywhere the idea that Denmark's going to attempt to do what France did and like block Greenland from trying to qualify for the World Cup. So if it can satisfy CONCACAF's requirements, it's a good shot it might be able to go all the way and get FIFA's requirements. But the process has now begun. Greenland, a nation that you might have never thought of in the entire world of football, has applied to be a part of CONCACAF. And if CONCACAF wasn't absurd enough, you could now have one of the worst away days possible playing away against Greenland in Nuuk. BBC actually got a hold of Greenland's manager, Morten Rukjar, who said that membership would be huge, obviously, for the Arctic island. And the goal is to build this up over the next 10 years. Not that they're going to take 10 years to get into CONCACAF, but that they have an 8 or 10 year plan in process to be able to build up an FA that's actually able to consistently call up national teams, maintain a national pool, develop youth talent across the island. The head of the Greenland FA, Kenneth Kleiss, said the plans are in place to build more indoor pitches, and a partner agreement with Iceland could see them host games there. So that's the source for them playing games in Iceland while they prepare things, since Iceland's by far the closest country to Greenland. And Kleiss went on to say, national pride has a lot to do with the idea of independence, so being able to play international football matches will mean an awful lot for Greenland. And look, is Greenland going to be good? No. They're probably going to suck, right? I don't know. I may check the score of their friendly against Turkmenistan over the weekend. I would expect Turkmenistan to win that fairly comfortably. But it's almost not the point that Greenland's going to suck, right? Because international football is about more than that. It's about having a team that walks out there and represents you. And Greenland has never had that. And so for people to be able to have that, I think CONCACAF's the home for it. CONCACAF's already absurd enough, and there's way smaller nations in CONCACAF already. I hope Greenland can do this. I hope somebody can kick them a little money to be able to get everything up to code. But if they're putting in the application, it sounds like they already have a plan in place to make that happen. So here's to Greenland, and I cannot wait to watch America's Golden Generation play an away match in Nuuk. Honestly, I might even go to that match. That sounds freaking sick. And maybe they'll finally let me in. Let me in! I was literally looking up cruises to get in, and they were all booked.